we've got, first and foremost, all this hoo-ha over the grooming gangs scandal. The Labour government saying there's not going to be a national inquiry into this. Kemi Badenoch saying there should be. Nigel Farage saying, well, why didn't you do one when you were in power? Also, there's all this stuff about social care and how that's going to be reformed, but we're not going to get the proposals for another 3 years, apparently. So lots to talk to the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Andrew Gwynne, who joins us now. It's good to see you. Thanks for your time, Andrew, as always.
Good morning.
Can we start with the grooming gangs issue? Because really, this does need to be looked into. Kemi Badenoch's got a point, hasn't she, when she says, without this sort of national public inquiry that is being called for, how do you join the dots between this so that, A, you can learn more lessons, and B, people can be properly held to account?
Well, look, it's not like me to agree with Nigel Farage, but I do think he has a point when she was able to do some of this in government. Look, the issue for me is that we've already had national inquiries into these serious issues. We've had inquiries into Telford, we've had inquiries into Rotherham. Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, commissioned an inquiry into Greater Manchester, which includes Oldham. We've had the national inquiry into child sexual exploitation in 2022, which has a long list of recommendations for the government to take on board. There does come a point where it's enough of the talking. Kicking this further into the long grass isn't acceptable. We need to start acting on those recommendations. We need to make sure that there is justice for the victims, for the girls. And that's really what should be the focus now of this new government, is ensuring that we deliver justice and we deliver change, not have more talking. I think Kemi Badenoch needs to stop playing politics. You know, it's a nice headline, but the reality is there are real lives here that have been affected by a real issue in parts of the country. We need to learn lessons from those inquiries that have already taken place, and we need to get people through the criminal justice system, and we need to get action on the ground for those victims.
Yes, but how can you get action for those victims? How can you ensure that justice can be done without a full national inquiry and without a full understanding of exactly what happened across this country? It is a national scandal. That national inquiry that you've mentioned, it drew criticism at the time for its limited scope. It only focused on cases between 2011 and 2014. And Jess Phillips talking now saying, look, it's up to Oldham to commission an inquiry. It isn't to do with the government. It isn't anything to do with government meddling. Why are you sweeping it under the carpet? This isn't
We're not
about
sweeping
Oldham.
it under the carpet.
This isn't about Rotherham. This isn't about Rochdale. This is a national scandal. We need to connect the dots in order to understand. Without understanding, how can you gain any sort of justice for these victims, for these young girls?
Because we already have a series of recommendations, and actually it's incumbent on this government, as it was incumbent on the previous government, to implement those recommendations and to ensure that justice is done. I don't think that justice is done by having another inquiry into all the same issues that we've already had local inquiries and, in the case of child sexual exploitation, a national inquiry on. We know what the issues are. We know what the recommendations are. We need to get justice for those victims, for those girls, and we need to build into our criminal justice system and our legal system going forwards robust mechanisms that make sure that these kind of things can never happen again. I want to see action, not words.
But well, has there been action? I mean, since these reports, and the last one in 2022, is there confidence in the government that these agencies which failed these girls would not fail again?
And that's why we need to take action, not spend the next couple of years talking about stuff that we already know. And what frustrates me, Stephen, is that, you know, if Kemi Badenoch wants to play politics here, her government has had the opportunity to implement these recommendations, to make changes to these institutions, and they didn't do so. It falls on our desk to do it, and that's what we are going to be focused on, what the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice are going to be focused on in the immediate future, is building that real change so that the victims get justice and so that hopefully things like this can never happen again. We don't want to talk about it. We want to see action.
So what action is being made?
Well, we've got the list of recommendations. The Home Office and the Ministry of Justice are considering those recommendations. They will be implementing changes in a whole variety of areas. But this is precisely the point. We need to move on from talking about a problem to trying to resolve it for the future.
But you just haven't listed any action there. You haven't listed an action.
There's a long list of recommendations in the child sexual exploitation report that goes to various different departments in government, including the Department of Health, and in terms of how the NHS deals with victims of sex abuse and how the health system provides that wraparound care, which has been not in existence in some of those cases, how we get better reporting across the health service to social care and to other agencies. There's a whole range of recommendations, really detailed recommendations, that across government we are now considering and driving forward action points to try and resolve these things for the future. But that's exactly the point. We can talk about this and talk about it and talk about it. We can produce report after report after report. It doesn't change a single outcome for the victims of the grooming scandal. What we now want to do is to tighten up the law, to make those changes and to ensure that things like this can never happen again.
All right, you lead us on perfectly to social care. And a national care service, which the government says it wants to bring in, because this is something, and we understand now, I mean, we know it's a hugely difficult and hugely complex area. However, proposals for the long-term funding and major reform of social care in England aren't going to be on the table until 2028, we understand, where I mean, the boss of Care England says this is not an option. People in care today cannot afford to wait any longer. Their lives depend on action now. Why is it taking so long?
Well, of course, that criticism would be fair if we weren't already acting now. So there's two things going on here, Stephen. Firstly, we have announced today that there will be an independent commission into social care led by Baroness Louise Casey, who is, I would argue, the foremost public sector reformer of our time. And she will be tasked with looking at what the shape of a social care system, not just for the next few years or the next decade or so, but for the next several decades should look like, drawing on the experience of those that operate social care services, those that receive social care services, and the vast army of unpaid carers as well. But look, we've got to go further with this. We've got to build in political consensus, and that's why we have written to the opposition parties to invite them to take part in this commission with Baroness Casey, because look, we recognise the kind of changes that we are going to need, the kind of reforms we are going to need for our social care system for the future requires this change lasting more than the lifetime of this government, going into several governments. And we've got to learn lessons from the past to draw that sting out of social care politically, because no political party has good form on this. When Gordon Brown tried to reform social care in 2010, Andrew Lansley of the Conservatives denounced it as Labour's death tax. When Theresa May tried it in 2017, we lambasted it as Theresa May's dementia tax. We've got to go beyond that. We've got to come up with a roadmap for delivery, and one that will survive this Labour government.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a good point. Andrew Gwynne, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that. I mean, look, cross-party support on that would be a huge game changer, actually.
Well, the Lib Dems welcomed it, haven't they? Saying it's the right approach. But it's no easy task, as Andrew Gwynne just said.
No, it really isn't. Well, look, we started off talking to the Minister about the grooming gang scandal. It's our poll of the day today. Do you think there should be a national inquiry into the UK's rape gang scandal? We'll bring the live results throughout the day. Final result in Martin's show later. And if you want to take part, you just go to gbnews.com/poll.